journey been, and how are you feeling about this big discussion today?
How am I feeling? Listen, I think entrepreneurial thinking is something that everybody can benefit from. Large corporations, government, everyday entrepreneurs. You know, my journey is a very simple journey. I found a need. I loved hip-hop music, and it was just coming out of the Bronx at that time. And I found that most of the designers in the world, they didn't respect the kids who were wearing their clothing. And there's nothing worse than giving people money and they take it and they go, I don't like you. And out of that frustration, I took one day, or one evening, where I made a bunch of hats and I sold them, you know, the next morning. I sold them, you know, standing on the corner, just like any of the vendors we see here. And I sold them and I made $800 in 1 hour. And the light bulb went off in my head that I solved the problem and I felt that I can be part of this community and I felt that I brought joy to other people. I didn't know that I'd create a global brand after that. But I did, and what happened is I failed and I closed the business 3 times from 89 to 92. But by 1998, I would have a globally recognized brand that I was distributed in 48 countries around the world. And then I started investing in other brands. And of course, that's why the investors are here. And then I got picked up for a show called Shark Tank. And I've been on that show for 15 years and watching entrepreneurship and the theory of entrepreneurship growing globally at the fastest pace I've ever witnessed.
It's amazing, isn't it? And it's remarkable how the landscape and the industry is changing, especially when it comes to technology. You started Fubu as well, so let's start off talking about that back then. How would you have used technology of today, you know, thinking back at that time as well, when you first started it?
Oh, technology today is, listen, you know, there was no internet out, there was no social media, there weren't even cell phones at the time. So I had to go find you and knock on your door for you to buy it again, right? And today's technology, if you really think about a kid as having a lemonade stand, you know, when we were growing up, and many of us were children, our lemonade stand or whatever we had was as big as the amount of people that drove by. Today, it's as big as the entire world, just because of this little device right here. Back then, I didn't know if I even sold my clothes to a store, who bought the clothes? Was it a woman buying it for herself, for her son, her husband? Was it a son buying it for himself? But today I know exactly who bought it, why they bought it, why they didn't buy it, what do they want to see again, and I can have them refer it to 1 million other people in 1 second. So entrepreneurship and the technology has democratized the entire world. And I think this is the time, this is the best time. The only problem is everybody can do it too at the same time. So the fundamentals of entrepreneurship or working hard is still the same. You got to be able to wake up before everybody, go to sleep after everybody, fail, overcome that, and bring other people around you to help with that kind of team sport. It's not something you can do by yourself.
No, that's very true. Now, the big theme of the sessions and the entire forum has been about building resilience and also talking about the better future, redefining economies. Let's start off by the entrepreneurial process as well. It's one of the most loneliest times, you know, to be on your own and to be thinking about progressing your own business. Why is that entrepreneurial mindset so important? Why do you advocate for it so much?
Because nothing can be predicted. An entrepreneur is somebody who uses the resources that they have at hand, and that's their inventory. You know, if everything could be predicted, then BlackBerry would still be in business, and so would Kodak. But they stuck to only a certain model. BlackBerry believed that they had the most securest platform, but they didn't realize that the people today wanted to be able to use applications and various other things. Kodak had a digital platform. Kodak was founded in 1888. Now, they went all the way till, you know, 2012 and filed chapter, but when they filed, the data was something like 40% of their employees were looking at their images on Facebook and Instagram, also on Shutterfly. Now, Kodak had the first digital platform, but they decided that their digital platform, no matter what, everybody's going to come to them, and they didn't acquire other people. They didn't do a lot of other things they should have done. Right? So entrepreneurial thinking is something that is to go against the unknown and take affordable steps. But I always say, if you look at somebody like a Jeff Bezos, who is, he's doing okay. During the pandemic, he applied entrepreneurial thinking. Has one of the largest companies in the world, realizing that shipping was all being bottlenecked. So he decided to tell all of his employees they can make extra money taking boxes home at night. It reduces shipping costs. It retained more employees because now they had more money working in the system, and it guaranteed that the end people with the boxes were going to get the boxes twice. It was 2 times more likely they would get it because it was delivered by an employee of the company. That's entrepreneurial thinking. Most people would have said, well, how do we reduce our, do we build more facilities to go and get the product out there and secure that we were going to do that? But that would have taken, the pandemic would have been over by then, right? He moved just like that. If you look at Intercontinental Hotels, when we went through the pandemic, what they decided, they had a high level of executives that were highly trained, but these people no longer had a job. Now they were going to leave, and they would have to retrain so many people and get them. So what do? They looked at the front line and realized that a lot of the frontline stores needed people, but they didn't have enough people. So what did? They bartered and traded these high-level executives at a place. So now they were secure that those people who wanted to work were able to have a job. They wouldn't get poached, and they would be able to bring them back a year, 2 years in, and keep that same employee. That's entrepreneurial thinking. A lot of people think that entrepreneurial thinking is something new. I mean, I was talking backstage, but in this region, entrepreneurial thinking was, as I shared with you, it's been done way before America was even thought of. People have been bartering and trading from the beginning of time. It is just, did they put a structure to it? All I did was put a structure to hats, and then I realized, well, I can get an investor here, I can get a distributor here, and I grew the business. But anything, if you are making, there's a lot of nuts and things in this area, there's no different than the vendor in the corner than the person who created Planters peanuts, or somebody with fruit. Del Monte, right? There's no difference in it. It's just the execution of it and understanding that you cannot predict everything, but being very loose and being able to move within the business, and then making that affordable where an investor here can say, I want to invest in that. And a lot of times the investment is not the money. OPM is often other people's mind power, manpower, manufacturing, marketing, mentors. So it's just a thought process that if you execute it correctly, it will be something you can use in science, you can use it in health, you can use it in so many things. And if your family has that concept, they're problem solvers. They cannot predict everything. They will start solving different problems.
You make it sound so easy, straightforward, so what?
It technically is easy. We've been raised by people who grew up in different generations. In the United States, it was taught many years ago, grow up, we're going into the industrial age, go to school, learn a business, learn a trade, and then you come up and you get a great job, and then you retire, right? But today, 50% of the kids graduating college today will retire with a job title that does not exist today. That means that 20 years ago, you told somebody they were going to be a drone operator, a Google pay-per-click manager, a social media expert. They would say, what is that? So now all of a sudden you go and we're telling these kids to only do this. Now, do I believe in higher education? Absolutely, 120%. But they have to be open to the theory that things will change in this world, right? And they have to be open to that. I meet too many entrepreneurs that ended up having a career straight out of college because their parents wanted them to have that career. Not because they wanted to. And then they're in there 5-10 years and they quit and they say, I finally want to do something that I really love. But they never started the business or were in the business. And by the way, every entrepreneur in this room, every founder in this room needs 10 more thinking people like that around them. I may be the entrepreneur in my business, but I have 10 more entrepreneurial thinking people around me that Sometimes they make even more than me because I'm busy rolling back into the business.
Now, speaking about the new roles, Chief Technology Officer was a big buzzword, especially during the pandemic that was thrown around. And the second part of our session is uncertain times. It was uncertain times during the pandemic. I think most of us were nervous what's going on. And now, looking at recent reports that over 93,000 people lost their jobs with layoffs in America or around the world in this tech industry. Disney even laid off staff as well. So how do you view this uncertain and tricky period, especially in the tech sector?
It is very hard. I mean, listen, entrepreneurs are not always going to get an A on their report card, and they're going to have to adjust in the changing times. And that's what happens when you look at industries that are starting to roll back. Often they roll back because a lot of times they were trying to advance themselves and serve too many leaders, right? And they were trying to be really good at content here and then over there. But during these times, you have to get as lean as possible. But when you go back to uncertain times, you have to go back to what is the core that you are selling? What is the core problem you're solving? If you're a gym owner and you believe this happened during the pandemic, if you're a gym owner and you believe that you're selling per square foot and you're selling memberships to the gym, but your gym is closed and nobody can go there, you're not really selling that. What you're selling is a healthy lifestyle, right? And that's a whole different thing. You know, I was talking to a gym owner who decided that he was going to send all his machines over to everybody. That's part of what they're doing. He realized that he had a lot of people, and Peloton was becoming extremely, big. So he started putting the workouts online to the members. He realized all the stores could not move the goods because they were closed. So he said, you can market to my members. You give them 15% off. You give me 10%. He did that with a fresh food company and a juice company. Now that same gym owner who had 15 members now has 3,000 members because he went back to the core of what he was selling. It was a membership. When I was selling FUBU at its height, I wasn't selling a T-shirt. I was selling a part of a community that FUBU was like the first hashtag of clothing, right? For us, by us, right? And you knew that when you saw somebody across the street, you knew what type of music they were in. I was selling a community. And a lot of times when we get large enough, we have to scale back and realize what's the core of what we're selling.
That thought process, what's your word of advice for it? Because when the pandemic happened and all these challenges are happening, most business owners have to make these very difficult decisions. They're not very popular decisions, especially with investors as well. And then there's rent payments, there's the mortgage payments, there is always an issue with satisfying all the investors. So how does an entrepreneur find that Zen moment to think back and think tactically? What's your word of advice for that?
Well, I can only tell you what I see myself and my other colleagues do. Transparency with the most important people in your business is your employees. Often your team knows way more about what is happening than you know. You know, you're at the top, right? And, if you have a larger corporation, you probably have about 8 people that report to you, and then 200 report to this person, whatever the case is. And often within a system, you want to try to find people within the system to say, what are we doing? And transparency also to tell them how the business is working. You go on, many times in businesses, people, they don't reevaluate what is the core of what they're doing and why are they doing it and why does the business run. Because often we give managers or we give other people, we need you to hit these sales. Well, why do you need to hit these sales? Because we have old inventory, because our warehouse is filled with goods, because we need to take up more space in anybody, whether it's on their content, on their phone, so we can keep the others at bay, or because we are making it easier for a buyer, because instead of buying I'll go back to mine, instead of buying clothing from Daymond, I can buy clothing, electronics, and jewelry, and makeup, so now I can buy from one provider and save me time. Right? And trust, because I know this vendor. So a lot of times when you're dealing with people in your system, because you've been running so good on autopilot, a lot of time we forget what the driving force of the business is. And the first time when you start dealing with change, you have to go into and say, here's our job. here's the market we have to hit. If we do not hit this because of these reasons, we're going to have to make some tough decisions. So get those tough decisions ready, and here are the marching orders. And what are we going to do? We're going to go out, we're going to come back in a month, 2 weeks, or whatever, 2 hours, and reevaluate. It's not easy being an entrepreneur at all, but when it is doing well, you're changing lives, and you're really empowering yourself, and you're making a difference.
Speaking about making the difference, and I'm sure this talk is expected to make a big difference with all the big audience, the large audience that has gathered here. What's your driving force? How do you seek inspiration? What keeps you going personally?
Well, I do something called goal setting, and I remember reading it in the book called Think and Grow Rich. So one thing I can say about people is the real, I think there's 3 pillars to success. It's knowing your why, it's setting the accurate goals, and then it's educating yourself. But often what I've seen is the biggest mistake that whether I've made in my life or other people have made is they're not honest with the why on what they want to accomplish. Right? I don't think I've ever met an entrepreneur that was in it purely for money and made money and enjoyed it. They either made the money and spent it, they ended up in the wrong place, or they were just very miserable with it. But most people, they tend to, that why is because it's somebody else or a fear or something. It's not usually what they want to accomplish. And so if the why is wrong, well then you're going to set the wrong goals. And if you set the wrong goals, well then you're never going to get the proper education to execute the proper goals. And that's my driving force. I rehack myself every 6 months. I reestablish my goals from health to faith, to family, to business. And I read those goals every night before I go to bed, and I read them every morning when I wake up in the morning.
And what's the best business advice you've received?
The best piece of advice I've ever received, I think, was when I was growing up. I grew up next to the airport, John F. Kennedy Airport. And the Concorde used to land at a certain time. It used to shake the neighborhood. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Concorde is. I'm sure many other people are. A supersonic jet. And my mother used to always say, you need to be faster than the Concorde or quicker than the lights on the Empire State Building, because I could see the Empire State Building from where I grew up. And right when it was about to get dark, either the lights came on, and that was in the winter time. In the summertime, the Concorde landed somewhere around 6 and change. So all the kids were out there playing baseball or whatever. You hear the Concorde, everybody had to run home. They had to get home before the Concorde. They had to be faster than a supersonic jet. But I remember saying to my mother one day, I said, Mom, how do men and women build massive machines like that? And she said to me, every single thing that, son, this house, the car, the street, the building, the Concorde, every single thing in this world started with one person with one idea that took one action. And why can't it be you? And I didn't have an answer for her. And after that, for the rest of my life, I believe that every single thing that I can create anything I want in the world. Am I willing to put in that time and discipline and educate myself? Different question, but every single thing can be created because the one person did it in the past that took, they had one idea that took one action. And that was probably the most powerful thing that I've ever been told, because then after that, then I had to just evaluate myself on if I was ready to go down that path, you know, in anything I want to do, but it was done before by somebody.
That's true. Now, I think a lot of people come up with these business ideas and get inspired by there'll be a number of people in this room who own businesses and even are about to start one. So if you were to give them an advice, what would it be? And thinking back to your time when you were selling lemonade, to see where how your career has taken you, what's your biggest advice to soon-to-be entrepreneurs? Well, it's hard because you have a room of very sophisticated entrepreneurs here and investors, and then you have a room of green entrepreneurs and investors. But I think the formula is, really as you're looking at the data and information of what you want to invest in, and the more sophisticated entrepreneurs here will understand this, is the biggest investment is your homework internally on if you want to head down that route. Who do you have around it, and why do you see the viability here? There are going to be, when I say that a lot of, I don't see people who have created great business who have made money. Now, if you're in finance, that's a lot of people I see in finance love the structure.
They love to create things. They love to see untapped resources and find ways to extract value. That's different than doing it for money. They love the challenge, the chess game of it. And most of them here, the sophisticated ones, understand that data. It really would be, my most important advice is, how are you digging deep and educating yourself on whether it's the right partner to acquire, what the right route to do? And it's usually not money that you put out. It is really an understanding on the market, where you want to go, where do you see it? Will you be excited about it no matter what? If not, are you investing in somebody who has been doing it 5, 10, 20, 30 years? That if you do the business together, and even if it fails, you'll learn together. And how do you take affordable steps and not just say, I'm going to build it? My biggest mistakes were when my ego got in the way and I felt that I'm Daymond John. I can do this, of course, not a problem. I have the money, I have the resources, but I wasn't in love with the business. And that's when I lost the most money. And often business is not the deals that you don't take, it's the deals you do take that could corrode your time and your energy and be such a pull on you.
And what are the common mistakes, in addition to that you've noticed with soon-to-be entrepreneurs, or because there's always a saying that never go into business with a friend, because that's the first thing you'd like to blame when it fails?
I think the common mistakes always are no clarity, the gray area. Oh, we'll put this together, we'll do this and that. No, what is your job? What is my job, right? What is where we have a buy-in or we activate it? You don't give it all at the same time. Also, the common mistakes are when people think that other people are going to do the things for them. If I understand that's your job and we're doing that, but when people come on Shark Tank and they say, well, the shark is, going to do it all. If I knew it all, then FUBU would be Nike. FUBU's FUBU, Nike's Nike, right? And it is your job at the end of the day. It is nobody else's job. It's your job. There's no one answer to it. Right? And I think that is it. And then when people are complacent, when they say stuff like, well, that's the way it's always been done. I think those are some of the most dangerous words you can always say. Because if somebody says that's the way it's always been done, there's a couple of things. Either they don't want to do more, they want to hold somebody back from doing something, or they just don't have the vision. Everything can be hacked, or everybody can be hacked. Everything can be reestablished a different way.
You also mentioned a lot about the X factor.
The what?
The X factor in a business. How does one identify the X factor, and why is it so important to have that in a business?
The X factor in regards to opportunity, or
but about a business as well.
Well, you only identify it as you start going down the path, right? You won't identify it by just purely just thinking about it on a piece of paper. You will identify it by going down the path, and that's why we say take affordable steps, right? A lot of times change is not created until you actually take the steps. I can analyze what I think an entrepreneur is going to like about it, what I think a customer is going to like, but you don't get that until you get that data back from the customer. And that's the X factor. The X factor is you don't know what you don't know, right? And I mean, there's been plenty of companies that we can talk about that started off as one thing and they ended up as totally something different. I mean, Sony started off as selling rice cookers. Now Sony is one of the, obviously large for various different reasons. Listerine started off as polish for taking paint off of furniture, right? They decided to come out with a campaign called Stop Chronic Halitosis, and people didn't know what that was. It was bad breath. They watered it down, and now you don't ingest it, but so there's so many businesses that start off with something that led itself to something totally different.
Now, I'd like to also touch upon the future. We are running short of time. So, in terms of the disruptive force that we see, obviously metaverse is there, and then we had Robert talk about the virtual economy, the digital economy focus is huge here in the United Arab Emirates. Your word of advice for entrepreneurs to be on top of their game, because now we've seen ChatGPT also grabbing the headlines. How should one stay on top of their game, and how should they view this disruptive force?
So there's a couple ways to view this disruptive force. The first of all, everything that's going to be created is going to create more opportunity, and then you must engage in it, right? Because just like ChatGPT, well, as many people are, there are going to be plagiarism, there are going to be things that are sourcing other things. Well, there's going to be a lot of intellectual properties there, and there's going to be a lot of other AIs that are going to be created to show you that your employee did use this thing and how to safeguard you against other things. So there's opportunity to create as well, right? But there's also the thought process of everything that we have here has been done before in one way or another. There's nothing new. It's just a new form of delivery, I like to say. You know, so Airbnb is still a timeshare, Uber is a limousine service, and Facebook is a nasty chain letter. You know, the Snuggie is still a blanket. It just has 2 holes in it. And if you look at the fundamentals of that, we look at social media and we say, wow, that's a whole new platform. It's a new platform, but if you like music, you used to go to the record store and look at all the album covers and read everything and then look inside and say where the new party's going to be. You're just doing it on another platform. And the way is, how do you apply those fundamentals to what you're doing into this new world? Right? This new world is just democratizing everything, and everybody, you can be in Africa and you can be 2 kids in a room, and now you can have a concert all around the world. Well, how do you monetize that? And how do you find those other new kids and or people who are coming up and use the fundamentals of what you know with that? And in closing, basically what I've realized over the last probably 10 years is the ones in charge that have a lot of manufacturing, finance, pipelines, distribution, they're here. The ones who are creating the forward movement have always been the younger generation, right? 10 to 25, whatever the case, and especially our children. Once you are able to bridge that and find that area in between here, you're almost unstoppable. But this party is usually not talking to this party, and this party doesn't even know how to talk to this party. But if you can have a symbiotic relationship, especially with our children, that's our most valuable investment, isn't it? If you can have a symbiotic relationship with them and learn and apply some of these new things you're doing to the fundamentals of what you know, you're going to be unstoppable.
Rightly put over there. So, ladies and gentlemen, this was Daymond John speaking to us here at Sharjah Investment Forum. I know you've got another session at the Investors Lounge where you'll be meeting some of these wonderful entrepreneurs that have gathered here in this hall. Thank you very much for joining us. Big round of applause.
Thank you.